Linda Burney is the Federal Shadow Minister for Families and Social Services and joins you. Good afternoon, Minister.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well, but I do have a job, so I'm one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, we are.
Can you tell us which group that you're most concerned
Sure.
is to be hardest hit by this reduction in the JobSeeker allowance?
The reduction in the JobSeeker allowance is going to disproportionately affect older women, particularly women who are over 60, and it's very hard for those women to find a job because you face age discrimination and all those issues, of course, that we are familiar with older people trying to get a job. And the other thing, of course, is that quite often we will find that people in that age group, particularly women, are on JobSeeker for some years.
Yeah, and so we're talking about the sort of, late 50s, 60s, but before they're eligible for a pension?
We are talking about that age group and that particular cohort that you've described. And the other thing is that a lot of those women are in rental accommodation, which is extremely difficult most of the time and even more difficult now with COVID. So it's an incredibly worrying cohort of people. One of the strong arguments, of course, that I've been putting forward is that the government has reduced the amount of JobSeeker way too early, and it would have been the view of the Labor Party that it not be reduced at this rate. And the thing that's really, the really difficult thing is that people on JobSeeker do not know what's going to happen to them after the 30th of December, which is around Christmas, whether the government's going to snap back to these $40 a day or increase the JobSeeker rate on a permanent basis. There's absolutely no clarity about that.
So if the coronavirus supplement does end in December, that would bring the payment back to the former New Start allowance amount of $565 per fortnight, or the $40 a day. Can anyone live on that?
Well, I don't think people can live on that. And what we do know, and I know that you've followed this, what we do know, that people who were living on that amount of money were often homeless, often with children couch surfing or staying with relatives, and very often skipping meals or having to make decisions between eating and medication, and absolutely desperate.
What about the argument that some people have not been seeking work because they've been reasonably comfortable with the JobSeeker rates during the pandemic? Is the higher rate a disincentive to some people to get out of the system?
Look, I absolutely reject that proposition. I know that it's being peddled around the place. I mean, for a start, many of those jobs are in the agricultural industry, which is seasonal work, which is really difficult work. And for people that are on JobSeeker, if they've got a family, they just can't pull up their family and move across the country for a 6 weeks work. That's the first thing. The second thing that we do know is that in the city, there are about 12 unemployed people for every one position. And when you get out to country and regional areas, some of where you're broadcasting, we're looking at 28 unemployed people or more for one position. And that's the reality. The numbers I have are not lying.
Thanks so much for your thoughts this afternoon.
Thank you.
Just before we let you go,
Yes.
Are you hearing any good news? Like, is there any sense that perhaps Prime Minister will be looking at perhaps extending the higher JobSeeker for a little bit longer? Are you hearing any whispers?
No, we're not hearing any whispers. I wouldn't be surprised if the government does something in relation to age pensions in the budget. But the thing that Labor's been arguing very strongly is there should be a major investment in social housing, including housing for First Nations people and housing for women escaping domestic violence. And I hope we get some news there, but I fear that we may not.
Linda Burney, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Ms Burney is the Federal Shadow Minister for Families and Social Services.